We didn't have audio this morning for some reason. Yeah, you're right. So now we're going to have audio, and then we're going to have to set it up over here as well.
You got it fixed?
I probably didn't set up the mic properly in the morning, and I saw the red mark there, but I was in the middle, so I couldn't stop. Okay, so let's see. Thank you very much for the coffee. Okay, so we're going to start from 2 dots. I just want to quickly review what we learned yesterday. We learned yesterday about a child that was not mechuyev in a bris in the morning during the processing of the Korban Pesach, but late in the afternoon before Yom Tov became chayiv for a bris, still needs a bris in order to be able to eat. And we had 6 different scenarios of how that could have happened, such as if the parents were in jail in the morning, or if the child's head was out but not body, and how did he survive for 8 days that way? It was because he was screaming or he was sick. I tried those as weight loss strategies. So far, they have not worked for me. And then we had a svara of let's see what else we had. Svaras as to why you had to wait. Another svara was that the baby was sick. Right, the baby was sick, and it got better a week before, or it was not that sick, and it got better that day. So all the different svaras. Then the Gemara said that the mitzvah of Priya was not given to Avraham Avinu; it was given to Yeshua, and we arrive in the fact that the Torah says, the Navi says that Yeshua had to do a bris over again on those who who already had a bris. So it's a raya. It's because we had to add the Priya. Torah just mentions that, of course, Avraham Avinu did Priya anyway because he was Mekayim called their Kula, but it was an intimate to advice. So I saw from somebody who writes down, Moshe Weinberg would appreciate this. The Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted the mitzvah meal that Avraham Avinu did to have both the advantages of being a mitzvah vayser and the advantage of any mitzvah vayser. So part of it was mitzvah, part of it wasn't. So in the bris, the meal that Avraham did, he harnessed the powers of both. And halacha l'maisa, there's a shaila. We know a navi cannot be mechadish something that wasn't there from the Torah. So how could Yeshua be mechadish a new halacha of priya? Elamai, it must be that it's a clarification, and the mitzvah was given by Matan Torah with priya. It was clarified by Yeshua, and therefore, if a moil does a mila, but forgets to make the bracha, he could still make the bracha before the priya, because there's still a derisive part of the bracha, part of the mitzvah that has not yet been completed.
Yosy.
Yes.
You said the same thing by the mitzvah. Why a woman has no
exactly. Why Kadosh Baruch Hu made it that the woman is not mitzvah vaysa on Puravu and a man is, so that the product, the child, all of us are the product of the power of mitzvah vaysa and in mitzvah vaysa. Precisely. Okay, and then
Who
we had,
says it?
I don't remember, but Rabbi Rosner spoke it out. And the other point that we learned was that in the midbar, they didn't do bris milah either because traveling knocks you out and it's not a good time to do a major operation, or because they didn't have the ruach tzfaynis, which we're going to learn a little bit about today. The Gemara asked, why didn't they have a ruach tzfaynis? So the Gemara says because it would blow away the clouds. So we were talking a little bit, the whole thing was a mess. Well, so maybe there could be a ruach tzfaynis blowing away the clouds. But then Rashi says, the main thing that the ruach tzfaynis does is make it a clear day, gets rid of the clouds so it could be a bright sunny day. So by definition, the ruach tzfaynis does that. So, but in our case, we wanted to have those. We wanted to have the anonym. So Kadosh Baruch Hu made it that the ruach tzfaynis shouldn't blow. So we are like 8 lines from the top on the Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, and we're going to learn a little bit about the ruach tzfaynis. Tanu Rabbanan. Everybody has a go-to place or thing that they do when they need to get a special shot in the Shmaya. They have a tzara, they have a need. Everyone has their little skulas. We're an am skula, a rebbe, right? So we're going to learn a little bit about that today. Tanu Rabbanan. The Rabbanan taught us, the 40 years. So Yisrael b'midbar, by Chatzos Halayla, there was always some ruach tzfaynis. So even though it wasn't blowing a whole day, and that's why they couldn't do a bris, but don't think it stopped completely. And we're going to see from Rashi, in fact, la'olam vod, forever and ever, every single day, l'chal ha'pochos, there's a little bit of a ruach tzfaynis by midnight. So it wasn't just those years in the Midbar. It's even those years in the Midbar that they were Nizufin, they still had their bit of Ruach Tzfainis. Correct. Not for that little bit, I guess. Shenemar, how do we know that Chatzei Alayla, that Chatzos is as man masugel, is as man masugel for tefillah, it's good for the Jews? Because what happened when the Pari was in his pajamas in the middle of the night? It was a double nice. Not only did the Mitzrayim get killed, but the Eden were saved. So you see, Chatzos Alayla is a very good time. My Talmudah, why do we care to know this? Hakamash Lund, Eishrat and Yosy. Don't say, hey, there's an Indian to find the Taskula time, a good time to daven. You see, there's something about an Eis Ratzon that we should capitalize on, we should exploit. And there's a very interesting Rashi over here, Eis Ratzon Milsahi. Dr. Rashi, the given the Chatzos Alayla, Eis Ratzon Avoy L'Makas B'Choyres, since it was an Eis Ratzon for Makas B'Choyres, have a Nami Eis Ratzon L'Ruach Tzvainis. It's logical to say that that's when the Ruach Tzvainis comes. The Ein Lach Yom, so Ruach Tzvainis, Ein Min HaSheves Boy, B'Chatzei Alayla. There's no day, it's like clockwork. You can be guaranteed that the Ruach Tzvainis will blow a little bit at least, B'Chatzei Alayla. And David used it literally like clockwork. He used it as an alarm, as his alarm clock. B'Zel Yasim David, Keener Tali L'Mayla B'Mitasei, he hung a harp on top of his bed. If you ever saw the size of those harps by Chasnas, I wouldn't be so comfortable sleeping on a bed that there's like 1,000-pound harp sitting over my head. But David must have had a good hoist there to make sure it's secure. Yeah, the Nikva Klapi Tzafin, he set it up in such a way that it faced the north, that when the north wind came, it would pluck on the harp strings that would wake him up. The harp would start playing, and that automatically made David and Melech wake up. Not only then, nevertheless, midnight is a tremendous Eis Ratzon. Tremendous Eis Ratzon is what we learn from here. It's a good time to daven, midnight. So I know by myself that I associate certain nagunim to be very nakishma. For instance, the sound of my alarm clock, if my daughter decided that she wanted to walk out to the chuppah with that niggin, I wouldn't be able to do it. Because whenever I hear it ringing, even by somebody else, it gives me the chills because I associate it with dragging myself out of bed. If my alarm clock was David HaMelech's harp, I wouldn't be able to attend a wedding that had a harp playing there. It would grate on my nerves because I associate that sound with having to get out of bed. David HaMelech recognized what a phenomenal opportunity is to wake up to daven. To him, it represented the most beautiful sound in the world. It's time for Eis Ratzon. No, we didn't. No, we didn't. Yeah, tell us how to modern dormitory. So that song probably still bothers you to this day.
Wake up to it?
Yeah.
People
said you can't wake up to music.
That's not music anymore. People told me today that alarm clock songs that used to play on their alarm clock when they were little kids, they still can't take listening to today because they associate it with something bad. But I'm trying. But my point that I want to make is, what to us is bad having to wake up was the David HaMelech, the biggest simcha in the world, right? Uses harp for it. Another thing you see is very simple. So why do we have all those schools daven by midnight? The Torah is it's not something smart. So I told somebody over what a Eis Ratzon is. When I had my issue with the unions, I was in big trouble. So I went to Reb Shmulevitz, and he saw that I was very distressed. So he said, "Are you that distressed that you can actually cry out? I'm sorry." I said, "Yes." So he said, "We have in the family Kabbalah from Chaim Shmulevitz, I believe he said, that if you say all of Tehillim in one shot without being mafsik for a second, that whole Tehillim creates a Eis Ratzon. And if Toich K'dei Dibur, you make up a kosher, guaranteed that it's going to be Niskayim." And he told me that Chaim Kineski told him that Asher Yotzar is not a hefzer. In other words, you have to go to the washroom and you're allowed. Any other hefzer is a hefzer. So you see what an Eis Ratzon is. I don't know. I'm just saying what I was told. I didn't. So Chaim Tzvi said, God tell him, if you say, I heard there's a Eis Ratzon, it's a skula, if you say one kapitel to him, but you say it with kavanah, you understand every word, that's an Eis Ratzon. I said, you're right, but that's probably much harder than saying the whole Tehillim. So we try to pick what's easier. I can also get up at midnight and daven, but I'm not going to, right? So you look for the instruction that works. I've done it many times. Yeah, the only thing is I become, as I'm saying the Tehillim, I become distracted thinking about what I'm going to ask for when I finish. An hour and a half in the road. Okay. Oh, you're welcome. So let's see the Halakha Gemara. So there's something called an Eis Ratzon. It's not something to make fun of. It's to the contrary, something to exploit, something to take advantage of. Gebaltic. So we are now up to a new sugya. Meshichas ha'erel. Amar Huna. Dvar Torah midaraisa moshuch oichel b'truma. What if somebody did a bris and then you're able to stretch your foreskin and make it look like an arla again? So a person can actually make himself look like he's an arla. But if you did that, Dr. Huna, midaraisa, he could still eat truma. Umidavrayim, but midarabanon goes through a law. They made a gzera that he shouldn't eat truma. Mipnei shenirka arl. He looks like an arl. It's a pasnish that he should eat truma. So midarabanon, they're mechayivim. He get another bris. He wants to look like a guy. He wants to look like a guy. Yeah, that's why someone would do it. Okay, so Zok Gemara, we're going to see another reason why someone will do it. You ever heard the term "my body, my choice"? You heard that term before? So keep that in mind as we learn today's Gemara. Zok the Halakha Gemara. Meisvei. It says in the Brisa as follows: Moshuch Sarach Sheyimor. That sounds like it's the Raisa. So it's Shever on Rav Huna who says it's only Midrabanan. So Gemara, no, Midrabanan. Sarach Sheyimor doesn't sound like it's the Raisa. If we would say Moshuch also B'Truma, I would say it's the Raisa. Sarach Sheyimor means you should get a bris. So it's Midrabanan. Frank the Gemara, hey, you're right. Who the Ka'ari law, my Ka'ari law. What would the Havim mean to ask a kasha on Rav Huna? It's obvious from the Lashon Sarach Sheyimor that it's only Midrabanan. Hatzarach Katan. So Gemara, you know why the Makshif was confused and thought that he can bring a raya from this brisa. That means the raisa and Moshe cannot eat truma is because katoi b'seifa. The seifa of the brisa that we're going to quote now was somewhat misleading, and it made it sound like it's the raisa. What does it say in the seifa? A person who's a moshech should not get a bris. He should leave it the way it is. Why? If neishes sakana hiloi, it's a sakana. If someone tries to do another bris, I'm sure there's not as thick and as big a foreskin as there was before he was Moshe Harlasei, and we're afraid that he'll cut too much and he'll make himself into a krishavcha, which asks him to be part of Klal Yisrael. So better leave it alone. That's what the Rebbe said. Amrullah, the Chum told him, why would we be concerned that someone who fixes the Mashiach does another bris? Why would we be concerned that he'll become a krishavcha? Many people in the times of Ben Kuziva, where the government who was persecuting the Eden, forced them to be Moshe Harlasa. I assume they did it to break the spirit of the Eden. There's nothing more humiliating to a Jew if you make him into an oral again. So the government the Romans forced the Eden to be Moshe Harlasa. And when finally Ben Kosiva, who was Bar Kochba, revolted against the Romans and achieved independence for a couple of years, they all went in Malad again. And not only did they Malad again, they actually were able to have children. So you see, now one person became a Krishavcha. So why do you say, Rabbi Yehuda, we shouldn't give him a bris again? You see, that's what they did. It doesn't about the Himal Yimal, if you may have Mal as much as you have to. So you see, you could make multiple milos. Another pasuk says, "As Risi Hafer, Hefar, he threw away my bris." The Rabbi says, "Moshe to tell you that someone who pulls his erva, who pulls back his arla, and makes himself look like an arl, is Risi Hafer." So clearly, I have to make a milah. Before we get to the raya, what we want to extract from this brisa, let's just drill down right over here. Why did the brisa stick in this extra pasuk of his Risi Hefar? It says Himel Yimel. Why do we need this extra pasuk? Maybe Himel doesn't mean if you had a bris and you're a Moshe or Lasso, you have to mal again. Maybe it means, let's say the first time you did the bris, you missed something. So do as many surgeries as you have to do to get it right. But who said you have arrived from there that someone who was Moshe Losai needs another bris? Tashma, that's why he brought the second pasuk of his brisi hever, that he's called a may for a bris. So surely that means he has to do another bris. So basically, what happened when the Rabbanan were making their argument against Rav Yehuda, they brought psukim to prove their point. So whosoever, because of these psukim, the Mashkin misunderstood and thought that be the kanos of Lashas Kra, since the Brisa is bringing a pasuk to support the position of the Rabbanon that you need to do a bris again. Very ricey. It must be the Zechiv Deraisa. But Veloyi, that's not at all what the Rabbanon meant in their argument. It was the Rabbanon Ukra Asmachta Ba'am. And in fact, the only chiyuv to make another bris is only midrabanan.
Yosy,
Let's learn a little bit. Yes.
why do we bring the story? Who cares about the story of Bar Kochel? We care about two good solid psukim. If the story happened, didn't happen, we have the same power of the psukim.
Well, now that we know that the psukim aren't really deraisa, we're just using it as a remez. It makes sense why it brought the story, because the story is proof positive that multitudes of people did a second bris and nobody was injured.
But a story doesn't beat a pasuk.
A story beats a pasuk if the pasuk isn't really saying what we're saying. It is Himel doesn't mean you're mechuyev to do a bris if he was Mashiach's Erla. Himel we're just using as an asmachta, so it's a midrabanan to do it. They're using the pasuk Himel. That's not really what the pasuk is telling you. So if the pasuk is telling you do the bris, even though you're a Moshe Harlasa, yes, you would be right. But sometimes the Rashi bring psukim just because it illustrates a similar point, but it's not telling me the halach at all. I think that's what a smachta means. So from an smachta just means the Rabbanan say something, they find a pasuk that sounds similar, so it fits in. But the pasuk isn't really telling us anything, I think. So Ben Kaziva was his name. Rabbi Kiva was a Talmud of his, and he carried his kalim around. He was a big chuzan of Ben Kaziva. He called him Bar Kochva. The reason why I called him Bar Kochva is he was like the first Shabbos Tzvi. Rabbi Kiva believed that Ben Kaziva was Mashiach, and that's why he called him Bar Kochva, referring to the pasuk of Dorach Kochav Miyakov. That's why we call him Bar Kochva. Now we know that Rabbi Kiva was the ultimate optimist. I was listening to what's that? I never listened to it, but someone asked me specifically to listen to it. That guy Lichtenstein is a talk show called something. It was a talk show. Guy Lichtenstein. So he was discussing the sugya of abortion because we learned about abortions, and he went through the sugya of Moshe Shita and the other abundant Shita. So in the conversation, he asked an interesting question. He asked, "Why do we celebrate Lag BaOmer?" Because the 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Kiva stopped dying. Well, if there was some left, yes, it's a celebration. That's now they stopped dying, but they all died. So what's the celebration? So he said over from somebody, I don't remember who, but it's the beautiful part. Rabbi Kiva was the ultimate in positivity, in optimism. What did Rabbi Kiva do when the 24,000 Talmidim died? He didn't veg out and become depressed. He instantly built again with 5 Talmidim, and we learned a couple of days ago that it's those Talmidim were the ones who were the keli with which the Torah was restored to Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Kiva was the ultimate optimist. So he probably also believed in the Mashiach, right? He was the optimist. Mashiach's going to come. So he was a big supporter of Ben Kaziva, and he called him Bar Kochva. He really believed he would be Mashiach. So let's see what happened in his days. Let's see Rashi. It's a very interesting Rashi. Ben Kaziva. Could you imagine? The Romans came in and they forced the Jews, literally invading the Jews' bodies. They forced the Jews to be Moshe Charlosim. So now all of the Jews found that they're Arelim. That's very humiliating. I assume they did it to break their spirit. Bekrach Beitar, this happened in Beitar. And then Begover Yad Ben Kaziva and Nilcham B'hem Ben Nitzcham. Finally, Bar Kochva's rebellion was able to overthrow them and get back some independence. And he was the king for 2.5 years. And during that time, when they threw away their oppressors, they were able to mala. Interesting story. The horrible tortures and persecutions that Klal Yisrael went through, this is a new one, that they forced them to make themselves look like a raven.
The bottom line is they were demolished.
Well,
So you did
on
that.
the
You take away from the fact
on
that
the
they're demolished.
on the tzad that it's Doiraisa, then it wouldn't be Gamal. Now, of course, the Gemara says that it's Rabbanan, but it's definitely not a Geshmaka thing. It definitely would break their spirit. Because it could be the Briskers weren't concerned, but the Chassidish for sure were concerned. They said, the Briskers said, but everybody else are bothered. Vice the Chois, it broke their spirit, right? They all fixed, even the Litvish fixed it. Because let's see the Gemara Viter. Tasha, Gemara Viter. So he thought it was the Raisa, and that's why he asked Gasha. Below you mean your brother across Machtbon. Zok Gemara, the Gemara wants to ask now Kasha on Rafuna. Tumtum. A Tumtum is someone who we don't know if he's male or female, right? And if a Tumtum is male, he doesn't have a bris because he didn't scratch in the wind yet, right? So Mela it's still a suffix, and if it's on the title it's a male, it's an oral. So Allah is ein oichel b'truma, and that's what Rashi says because he's a suffix oral. Noshav avodav oichlin. The wife of a tumtum can eat. Hey, if a tumtum we don't know if it's male or female, how could he have a wife? Oi, I'm on YouTube. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. A tumtum is non-binary. How could a non-binary have a wife? It's not a good kasha. Maybe he's a woman. So the Gemara is going to ask the kasha. This is going to be the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara is going to ask, how could a tumtum have a wife? So anyway, tumtum ein oichel b'truma. Noshav, I'm sorry? Yeah. Noshav avodav, noshav oichel. We know that the wife of a kohen, of course we're talking about a kohen over here, the wife of a kohen can eat truma. What about Moshuch, which is what our subject matter is about? Moshuch, or b'noilet keshu mol, or a child who's born mole already. Halach is harei olu, they can eat. So you see quite clearly that a Moshuch can eat truma. That's a raya against Rav Huna. Rav Huna said a Moshuch should not eat truma, right? Here it said clearly a Moshuch could eat truma. Androgynous.
So how does the Tumtum have a wife?
Oh, that's a Gavaltic Kasha. The Gemara is going to ask that question too.
Okay.
The Gavaltic Kasha. Although what you just said will get you canceled off YouTube, off every platform. But Lamaisa, we know that the Gemara is emes. How can a Tumtum have a wife? The Zog to Gemara, androgynous. So androgynous have the synonym of a male and a female. Verstetzich, that's provided that his Aver, his Zocher side was Gemalit, right? Because he has to be mole, he can't be a Noro. Oichel b'truma. And androgynous can be truma. Why? Because even if he's a wife, or even if he's a very b'fnei atzma, he could still eat truma because he's the son, the kinyan kesef of the kohen, as long as he's Gemalit. Vein oichel b'kachim, but an androgynous cannot eat kachim. And we're going to soon see. Rashi says we're speaking about kachim like a korban, like a chatos, and those are only eaten l'zichri kahuna. We all say it in the Zelma Koimon. These korbanos are only eaten l'zichri kahuna. And since an androgynous is suffix zocher, suffix nekeva, they won't be able to eat kachim. And then the Brisa, for some reason, mentions tumtum again. The Brisa already talked about tumtum. That was the first thing the Brisa said. Tumtum ein oichel b'truma. Now the Brisa again says tumtum ein oichel lo b'truma lo b'kachim. So that's the Gemara is going to ask as well. Why did the Tana repeat the halacha of tumtum? So that's our Brisa. Now let's see how we bring a raya. Katanimiyah. So one of the items in the Brisa was Moshuch. V'noil keshumol. And what does it say? Harei lo oichlin. So that's a klor raya against Rav Huna. Because Rav Huna said that Moshuch may not eat truma. Tiyufta Rav Huna tiyufta. So Rav Huna is agushlag. So you're looking at it with a funny eye. Is something wrong? Yeah. Could make sense? Yeah. Rashi doesn't like what I just said. Rashi changes the gears. And Rashi doesn't believe that from this Brisa you have a raya against Rav Huna. Rashi holds from here you have a raya to Rav Huna. How is that possible? Zok Rashi, he learns that since it says that a moishach, harelu oichlin, that's a raya only with the raya they can. The Brisa is not discussing the derabbanan, but avada midrabbanan would also. So you have a raya from Midra of Huna that midaraisa a moshach is allowed to eat truma. That's the raya. If Huna says midrabbanan you shouldn't, but the Brisa is referring to the deraisa. So Rashi looks for great and he likes the chat better. That from here you have a raya to Rav Huna, but midaraisa, in fact, a moshach is allowed to eat truma. Omar. Now that we finished our shayla about moshach, let's go back in and understand the Brisa. Tumtum eino oichel b'truma, noshav avodav oichel. Frek Gemara, noshav lo tumtum minolay. Exactly what Moshe Weinberg asked. How could a tumtum have a wife? We don't even know if he's male. Zakar ilay with the kaddish, and if you're saying that he made kedushin, the Tanya we learned Tumtum Shakidish, a tumtum that gave Kedushin, Kiddush of Kedushin. His wife, who he was Mekadosh, is a Suffolk Eshes Ish. She has the halacha of an Eshes Ish. Niskadesh, what if he accepted Kedushin from a man? Kiddush of Kedushin. He's a Suffolk Eshes Ish. Zok the Gemara, from there you don't have a raya that they should be able to eat Truma. Amar the Amar L'chumra, L'kula mi Amrina, Suffolk Ishahu. This bride is just saying L'chumra, he has to be machmer and fears like an Eshes Ish. But not that he's for sure an Eshes Ish, or she's for sure an Eshes Ish, that she can now eat Truma. Suffolk Ishahu, Bein Isha, Mikadeshes Isha. If we know that, at least in the normal thinking people, one woman cannot be Mekadesh another woman. So therefore, even though you have to be machmer just in case there's a kedushin here, that's l'chumra. But to say that you can eat truma because of it, it doesn't make sense. So we need to understand, why does it say over here, tumtum ein oichel b'truma, but noshav eat truma? How could a noshav eat truma? How could a tumtum get married? Amar Abaye, I'll tell you what it is. It's kishabeit of nikarish b'chutz. Even though you can't see what's going on inside there, but you see a little bit. You could see that there's male parts inside, and therefore we know it's a male. It's an oral, but it's a male. So therefore his kedushin will be a good kedushin. Not a suffix anymore, but he himself can't eat truma because he's not. That's how Abai understood. Rav Amar, my noshav, the women that we're referring to, is not referring to his wife, because we don't know if he's a male or female. It's Imai, it's his mother. Meaning, if his mother was a Bas Yisrael, and she was married to a Kohen, and she gave birth to a Tumtum, and then her husband, the Kohen, dies, just like we say a Ben is Michael's mother Truma, he's Michael's mother Truma. Imai Pshita. Why would I think otherwise? It's offspring that this Bas Yisrael had from the Kohen. So I would have thought that maybe a Tumtum wouldn't be Michael. We know even a Mamzer is Michael, a mother, even a grandmother of Truma, but a Tumtum not. Why? Michael. Only a child that can have offspring will be Michael. But this Tumtum who can't be Moilid, cannot be Michael's mother Betruma. Kamashwan, that doesn't matter. Even the Tumtum will be Michael's mother Betruma. So now we have two Pshatim in the first incident of Tumtum in the Bryce. Abai says it's not really a Tumtum. It's someone who we know for sure is a male, right? Because it's based on the Nikaris Mibachutz. And Rabbi said, no, we're talking about a real Tumtum or something. So up to Gemara, Tashma.
A daughter is Michael's mother also?
Yes. And the offspring, yeah.
There's no reason to say a tumtum is worse than a son or a daughter.
Correct, it's one or the other.
Right.
That's right. Tashma. Tumtum, Einay Oichel, Loy B'Truma V'Loy B'Kochim. Right, that was the last line in the Brisa, and everybody asked, why would the Brisa repeat itself? It was the very first case in the Brisa. So according to Abaye, he learned that the first Tumtum wasn't really a Tumtum because we knew it was a male. It makes sense. Tana Reisha, Oral Vadai. The Reisha was speaking where we know for sure this Tumtum is an oral. The Katani Seifa, Suffolk oral. And the Seifa was a real Tumtum where it's a Suffolk if the child's really the oral or not. Elul Rava, but according to Rava, both Tumtums mean the same thing. You don't know if it's male or female. Tumtum, the Seifa Lamali, why did the Brisa repeat? Why did the Tana repeat the same case again? Zot Gemara, my tumtum oral, right? What's the problem with a tumtum? Why a tumtum can eat truma? Because he's an oral. Hash the suffix oral loyachol, vade oral achol. It doesn't make sense. Why the Tana would repeat itself? Zot Gemara ma tam kamar. The reason why the Tana repeated it is not to repeat halacha. The Tana is trying to tell you. You know why I said at the beginning of the brisa that a tumtum cannot eat truma? It's because of the reason that I'm going to clarify at the end of the brisa. Ma tam kamar. What is the reason for the first statement that I said in the brisa? Ma tam tumtum einoichel b'truma. Why can a tumtum not eat truma? If there's a suffix orlu, because he's a suffix oral, the oral einoichel b'truma v'leibekachim. And since avada oral cannot eat not truma nor kachim, therefore in the first case of the brisa, I'm answering the tumtum from eating truma. So that's the pshat in the brisa. Sai according to Abai, sai according to Rav. Let's say this shaila of whether or not a moshuch is allowed to eat truma. Let's say it's totally in the machlokes tonight, and this is what the brisa says: moshuch, someone who's a moshuch, the gerishin is gayer kishumo, or a guy who already had a bris. That's he was an Arab. He already had a bris, and then he became a ger, so he doesn't have any orla. Or if a cotton shover is money. What happens if for some reason you couldn't make the bris on the 8th day? Now it's the 9th or 10th day. Bishar kol hanimulim, and any other people who need a bris, l'suye, including mish yesh l'shtei arlos, someone who has 2 arlos, and there's actually a shaila what this means. If it means he has 2 foreskins, that's 2 arlos. And the question is on the second one, or if he has actually 2 avarim, I would call that Siamese twins, right? He has 2 avarim. So the question is maybe making a bris on one would be enough, but he's making a bris on the second one. They could only get their bris by day. What does day have to do with anything? It says in the pasuk, "Uvayoim hashemini yimro b'sar losa." So the question is, if you have a chiyuv daraisa to have a bris, then it has to be done by day, by yoim hashemini. But maybe if it's their abundant, you don't have to do it by day. So the first time they're saying, since all of these have to have their bris by day, v'aisach or al daraisa, including a moshuch, Rabbi Lezer Shimon Aimer, no, bismanoim, the only one who needs to have the bris by day, whereby yoim hashemini yimel b'sar losa applies to, is bismanoi. But shaloi bismanoi, if it's someone having the bris not on the 8th day, or all the rest of the items in the list, that doesn't apply. So let's say, what is the machlokes here? The Ma'aseh Moshech Deraisa. The first town holds Moshech Deraisa is Mechuyev in a bris. That's why it can only be done beyond. Umar Sabar, and the second town there, Belezer B'Shimon, I think. Belezer B'Shimon says that Moshech is Midrabanan, and that's why you don't have to do it by day. Frank the Murray, that cannot be possibly pshat in the Beraisa. V'tizbra. Moshech isn't the only item in the list. There was other items in the list. One of the items in the list was cotton shavers mana. Cotton shavers mana mi ikal manama derabbanan. Does anybody hold a cotton who didn't get his bris on the 8th day? Now it's not a deraisa anymore. Avad is a deraisa. So how could you explain your Belezer Shimon Svara who holds that a cotton shavers mana who's mechuyev deraisa could be done at night? How do you understand that? Ella, because of that, the machlokes has nothing to do with the deraisa derabbanan. Everybody would agree that Moshech is only midrabanan, which is consistent with what Rav Huna said. And the cotton shavers mani is deraisa. Everybody agrees that child who didn't have his bris yet, avada is a chiyuv deraisa. It says bayoy mashmini yimo b'sar losay, but there's an extra verb. Who bayoy mashmini yimo b'sar losay? So the question is, do you darshan that extra verb? My savar daishin uvayoy. If it said bayoy mashmini yimo b'sar losay, I would say only if the bris was done on day 8, then it has to be done bayoy. But if it wasn't done on day 8, then there is no chiyuv. Or you might dash uvayoy. Any day that you do the bris, it has to be done only by day. So if you learn uvayoy, which means whenever you do the bris, even a cotton shaloi bismanoy has to be done by day, then when the Rabbanan made a takana that a moshech also needs a bris, they would have told us, make the bris the same way you would make another bris. That's not the main type of bris. Make the bris the same time you would make a bris of shaloi bismanoy. Shaloi bismanoy has to also be by day, because of the uvayoy. So to moshech will be uvayoy. That was referred to Tanakama. And therefore, a child who needs a bris to be deraisa, if it's not on the 8th day, it doesn't have to be done by day. And therefore, the moshech as well, when they're one or masak and he needs a bris, it could be also by day or by night.
Yosy?
Yes.
We learned a few minutes ago that there was a ruach sefinus for a short period every night. So if you're allowed to make a bris milah at night, so maybe they should have passed the 8th day. So after the 8th day, they can make a bris milah at night while that ruach sefinus is blowing.
I hear. I was thinking to myself that I don't think when you have a bris, you only want for that second ruach tzvayis. You want the ruach tzvayis the whole time because that creates an environment of healing. And if we look in Rashi on the top of Daf Ayin Beis and Aleph on ruach tzvayis, Rashi says, why is a ruach tzvayis good? Noicha, loy cham, it's not too hot. V'loy tenen, it's not too cool. V'chama zayrachas. So it seems like the ruach tzvayis helps create a clear, bright, sunny day, and bright, sunny days are conducive to healing. So if the ruach tzvayis is blowing in the middle of the night, it's good, but it's not going to create an environment of bright, sunny days so that the wound will get healed. So because you see clearly they needed the bright, sunny days that are effect of the ruach tzvayis. But if it only blows a mashu at night, it wouldn't do that.
You're talking about the moon is exposed to the wind or the sun. Everybody's
You mean you assume there's no bandages? I don't know, but I guess when the sun is shining, we know vitamin D comes from the sun. It helps the skin repair itself, right? Sunlight is very important. So I don't think this is just hocus pocus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the world. Sunlight is very conducive to growth. But so basically, it's just the fact that there was a small period of Ruktoinus wouldn't cut it. Pun intended. Okay. Zok Tahela Gemor Vayt. So now we have a machloikis if a mila shaloi bismanoi has to be by day or could only be by night, and we say that any mila derabanan would be just like a mila shaloi bismanoi, and if a mila shaloi bismanoi has to be by day, the mashach as well, and if not, no. Kiha Yosef Rabbi Yochanan. This is a fascinating story. A fascinating story. Kiha the Yosef Rabbi Yochanan the Kadarish. Everybody agrees that Rabbi Yochanan was a heavyweight in the Torah world, right? He was darshaning about Noisa. So now we're actually going off on a tangent, but we're discussing extra vovs, what impact they have. So Rabbi Yochanan said, Noisar bismanoi einin yisrach alabayoim. If you burn Noisar bismanoi, you can only burn it by day. What does Noisar bismanoi mean? I'm going to read Rashi, and I'm going to need your help to confirm what it is. Noisar bismanoi is like Rashi, b'yoim shenasa Noisar, the day it becomes Noisar. So I'm going to assume it means the last day that you can eat it. So let's say a shlomim on day 2, if you burn it on the day it becomes nicer, then ain't nisr el b'yoy. No, I'm wrong, because you're not allowed to burn nicer before it becomes nicer. That's destroying kosher. By nicer, it means the very first day after it became nicer. So the shlomim you can eat on day 1, you can eat it on day 2. The very first day that it becomes nicer is that after day 2, that you have to burn it on the 3rd day. So if you burn it on the 3rd day, you should only burn it by day. But if it's past the 3rd day, then nisraf bein b'yoim bein b'layla, then you could burn it bein b'yoim and bein b'layla. Why? Because it says in the pasuk v'hanoisar b'yoim hashlishi ba'eshi sarit. So it says b'yoim hashlishi to tell you that it has to be burnt by day. But it says b'yoim hashlishi only if it's burnt on the 3rd day. Do you say it has to be burnt by day? But if it's the 4th day, then it doesn't have to be by day anymore. The Eisvei Rabbi Lozer ben Pedas is who we're talking about. Rashi says Rabbi Lozer ben Pedas was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan, not to be confused with Rabbi Lozer ben Shamua, who was a Tana. So Rabbi Lozer ben Pedas asked his Rabbi Yochanan the following question: Rabbi Yochanan, you're saying that Noiser Shaloi Bismanoi does not have to be burnt by day; it could even be burnt by night. Frank Rabbi Lozer, I'll prove to you that even Noiser Shaloi Bismanoi can only be burnt by day. Because we learned, we only know that a child whose bris is on the 8th day becomes, you make your bris on during the day. How do you know the rabbi's tisha if a child bris is on the 9th day? And Rashi tells us, why would a child's bris be on the 9th day? It's if the child was born Friday afternoon, ben Neshmoshes. So we don't know if Shabbos is day 8. Or if Shabbos is, or actually, if it was born Ben Neshmoshes at the end of Shabbos, so we don't know if Shabbos is day 8 or if Shabbos is day 7. So then the bris gets pushed up to Sunday, right? I'm sorry. Yes, but Friday Ben Neshmoshes is a question between 7 and 8, not 8 and 9. Right, but Enechem will be on the 9th day. Right, Friday Ben Neshmoshes will be the same thing. That's right, correct. So true. Minayin l'Rabbis because not like Shabbos, right? Right. Minayin l'Rabbi's tisha, l'tisha, which is that case, or la'asara, because what happens if Sunday is a yom tov? So it's not doich yom tov either. Or la'achar asar, if Sunday was the first day of Rosh Hashanah, so you push it off 2 days, right? Or l'shnei masar. So Rashi is nilad ben hashmoshes, nilad l'tisha ben hashmoshes of Shabbos. Right. I'm sorry. If it's ben hashmoshes of Friday, it's on the 9th day. If it's ben hashmoshes of Shabbos, it's the 10th day, and then it could be the 11th or 12th day, right? If there's 2 days Yom Tov after Shabbos. Minayin, how do you know that even those the bris have to be by day? There's uvayoyim to include even if it's other not even if it's shaloi bismanon, like we had a second ago. But that's by bris, which is uvayoyim. By noiser, it says veha noiser. So there's 2 extra letters. So Rabbi Lazar said quoted this brisa, or he's not quoting it from a brisa. He's saying this. He's saying his own drasha, so to speak. And Rabbi Lazar says, "Afil leman the loy dorish vav vehei dorish." So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, how could you say that noiser that wasn't burnt the first day could be burnt by night? Everybody agrees Viha noiser will include any noiser could only be burnt by day. Even if you don't darshan vav vehei dorish. So after a kasha like that from Rabbi Yochanan's Talmud, ishtik, Rabbi Yochanan was speechless. He couldn't argue. Buzzed enough. After his Talmud, Rabbi Lazar left the room. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan Rishlakish. Hostig Azain. Man Talmud became a darshan. It's a gemach faratana. He's making darshaning psukim. Where easy leven padas. So Yosy v'dayrish k'moyshe v'pikmura. He became a ganze darshan. Amalei Rishlakish told Rabbi Yochanan, this is going to be very humiliating. The day you thought that he's making up his own drushes, Masnisahi. He was quoting a brisa in Teres Kahanim. So Rabbi Yochanan says, where is it? So Rish Lakish said, Teres Kahanim. So Rabbi Yochanan was like humiliated. He didn't know the Teres Kahanim. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan was a Sarah Torah. So what did he do? Listen to what he did. Nafak Tanya B'Tlasal Yomi. Rabbi Yochanan went out. It's probably Nafak Duck. He didn't have it in print. He had to go to the Agura to find the Masifta Gemara. He went to find a shul that had a printed version of the Teres Kahanim, and he hurried it through. In 3 days, he learned the entire Teres Kahanim, and v'savar b'tlasa yarchi. And in the next 3 months, he learned it be'ion, and he became klor in it. Now that he found out that there's such a drush. So I'll call upon him. It seems that it's accepted unanimously that noiser, no matter when it's burned, has to be burned by day. Rabbi Lazar. What if the halacha? So now we're starting a new subject. So we had the subject of moshach arlasai, which it seems to be everybody agrees that midaraisa he can eat truma midrabanan. He shouldn't eat truma until he malas. And we had the halachas of a tumtum. A tumtum can't eat truma because it's a suffix if he's an oral. And we learned about the androgynous, and we learned about which people need the bris by day and which ones can even have a bris by night. Okay. Zok tehele gemara vayter. Rabbi Lazar, oral shehiza. What if the oral decided that he is going to be in charge of spritzing the paraduma water on someone who becomes tummy? Is that going to work? Zok the Gemara has a asay ksher. He could make hazah. Eyes an oral. The Gemara midi to have at full yoim. He shouldn't be any worse than full yoim. What is it full yoim? A full yoim is, let's say a person became tummy, he touched the sherets. Let's say a kohen touched the sherets. So he's now tummy. So he goes to the mikveh, but he still can't eat truma. He has to wait till nighttime. So he's at full yoim, meaning he's toiveled already, but he's got to wait for nighttime. And that's the very first Mishnah in Masechet Brachos. When could you say Kriyas by night? It means before night because he's at full yoim until Harav Shemesh until sundown. So at full yoim, Aval Bisha also b'truma. A full yoim can eat truma, which is exactly the first Mishnah Brachos. Nevertheless, kosher b'par. A full yoim could spritz from the water of the paraduma on someone who's tummy. So therefore, if it's full yoim who's also b'truma, could spritz in the paraduma, why should the oral be any different? Zok Gemara, I'll tell you why it should be different. Malat full yoim, it should gain mutter b'maiser. But full yoim is allowed to eat maiser, but an oral cannot eat maiser. Zok Gemara, what does eating maiser have to do anything with this? We're not discussing if the oral is allowed to eat something. Anan l'nagia kamrinon. All we want to know is if the oral is allowed to touch the mechatas to spritz it. So you can't bring me a raya with eating. So therefore, I would make the argument who may not touch truma because he will be metamed. Nevertheless, muter b'para, he's allowed to spritz to make paraduma. Oral, shemuter b'negia. An oral can touch truma. Our oral is not tummy. Surely, shemuter b'para, he should be able to spritz the water of the paraduma. So we have a raya, in fact, that an oral is allowed to spritz the water of the paraduma. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa to support that fact. Oral shehiza, an oral who did the spritzing of the paraduma water, has also kshera And in fact, we have a case of Allah al where this was allowed. Tumtum shekidesh, a tumtum who made kachim. This is not talking about a tumtum who married. It's a tumtum who made something. No, he didn't make. Rashi shekidesh means she'irev efer b'mayim. So the way the paraduma water works is you take ashes from the paraduma, you gather them, you mix it with water, and then you have the mixture, then you spritz. So the tumtum shekidesh is the step before hazah. Tumtum shekidesh kiddushay pasuk. That kedushin is going to be pasuk. Mipnei shu safek oral, because a tumtum might be an oral, the oral pasuk lakadosh, and an oral can't do the mixing. He could spritz, but he can't do the mixing. The androgynous shakidesh, but an androgynous that did it, kiddush kosher. Now we're speaking about an androgynous who made a bris on his male organ, because a woman, either he's a male or a woman. If he's a male, he has a bris. If he's a woman, the Tanakama holds that a woman is allowed to mix the afer with the water. Rabbi Yehuda argues on the Tanakama, and he says a woman cannot mix the afer with the water. Why? Why? And Rabbi Yehuda holds Isha psula milakach. He holds that Isha's not allowed to do the mixing of the ashes with the water. Katanimia. Now let's go back to analyze the brayso we just learned. Oral, the suffix oral, pasul milakadish. An oral or a suffix oral cannot be mikadish the water. So if he can't, we're assuming he shouldn't be able to spritz it either. So how could you say that an oral is allowed to spritz the water? It seems to be here that they're not allowed to. Zok Gemara, Amr Yosef, you're right. We have a Tana who holds that an oral cannot. You know why? Because it's a different Tana. High Tana, Tana Devei Rabbi Kiva. This Tana is Rabbi Kiva. The Marber Leila oral Katame. Really, an oral has no din tuma, and then the oral is allowed to do the azah, and the oral is allowed to do the mixing. There's no problem. But Rabbi Kiva, now he doesn't say this for favor. Rabbi Yosef wanted on his own hostilely that Rabbi Kiva holds that an oral is just like a tummy. Why would he dream up that Rabbi Kiva would hold an oral is like a tummy? This goes back to what we learned a couple of days ago. How do you know that an oral is not allowed to eat truma? We know it either from the Gzer Shava of Toisha V'Sacher from Korban Pesach, but Rabbi Kiva said no. We know Minei Obey the pasuk when it lists up all the people who can eat truma says ish that has all these problems cannot eat truma, and from the extra ish we darshan someone who's an oral. So Zok Rabbi Yosef Gevaltik the Tanya Rabbi Kiva ish Rabbi Oral. Ish that pasuk is coming to my oral. You know what one of the people in that list that the Torah specifies is not able to eat truma? The Tameh. So Rabbi Yosef wanted to come up with a theory. Maybe Rabbi Kiva, who learns that an oral is possible from eating truma, maybe he'll hold that he has a din of a tumah and he's going to be metama truma as well. Maybe it's a big chiddush to say, but at least now we have somebody to blame this brisa on, who says that the oral cannot touch the afer of the paradum. Amar Rava, so Rava said, I was sitting in front of Rabbi Yosef, and Vakashali, and he asked me, it doesn't make sense to say that, because there was never a Tana anywhere that we find anywhere in Shas that equates oral with a Tame and says they have the same halacha. If you found a Tana somewhere that said so beferish, then I would be willing to blame that on Rabbi Kiva. But you want to make it up. It says over here that an oral is possibly the kaddish, and you want to make up a shita that holds Rabbi Kiva that's tummy. It's too big of a chiddush to say without at least having a brisa that the ferish puts oral together with tummy. Of course, I do have a brisa that puts oral together with tummy. The brisa says oral v'atame petur min hariyah. An oral and a tummy are not mechuyev to be oil regal. That's not a right, because that has nothing to do with tumah. Hashem mishum demois. An orla is mias. Since an orla is mias, it's appropriate that he shouldn't come visit Hashem in the palace. But that has nothing to do with hilchos tumah. So once again, Rabbi Yosef felt that it's too rich to make up this whole Torah that an oral has a din of tumah, and that's going according to Rabbi Kiva. And therefore, Rabbi Yosy feels it's a little bit shverlich because you seem to have a raya here that an oral shouldn't be able to do azov and shouldn't be able to do kiddush, even though we have brises and we have brises and we have Rabbi Lozer who said that an oral she'iza hazah shekser. So that's another halacha we learned about is an oral allowed to do hazah, and by extension is an oral allowed to mix the afer of the paraduma with the water. Okay, gewaltig. And then we learned that an oral for sure cannot do re'iyah because it's mias that he should go there. The azul the tamayu. Now we had a machlokes between Rabbi Kiva, between Rabbi Yehuda earlier, who said that androgynous cannot play with the mayim the chatas. Why? Because it's a suffix isha, visha pshulim ila kadesh. And the Tanakama holds that an isha is allowed to make a kiddush. So there's a machlokes tanoim. Can an isha mix the afer and the water or not? So this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama is ozul tamayu. It's their machlokes that they had elsewhere. The Tanya, hakoyok sherem lakadesh. Everybody could mix the afer paraduma with the water. Chutz mecheresh shoyte v'katan. Rabbi Yehuda is machshir b'katan, but who poisel be'isha. The older woman cannot do it. So that's what we said earlier as well. Rabbi Yehuda also can't do it. With androgynous. Rabbi Yehuda also an androgynous can. So that's consistent with what Rabbi Yehuda said in our brayse, that an androgynous is a suffix isha and an isha cannot do it. Okay, let's stop here. This is going to be the reasoning why yes and why not, and we'll be mamshech here tomorrow. Okay, gewaltig. Everyone should have a bench today. Today is the day before Lag BaOmer, and the mitzvah is going to be a hadlaka tonight in shul. Everyone should help that all of our lives should be lit up. Bracha and simcha.
Weather permitting. Otherwise, it'll be inside and out.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Good.